Download Whiskey Hell Podcast. We call attention to the mainstream media narratives weekly in hopes that you'll have fun with how ridiculous the news really is. We don't want to change your mind. We just want to give you perspective so that you can choose more wisely and be more aware. Couple that with great craft beer, hilarious stories, deep thoughts, and real conversations. We know you're going to enjoy it. Download Whiskey Hell Podcast anywhere you find outstanding shows.
Take my eyes open to force reality. Why can't you just let me eat my weight in glee? Hush.
Welcome, World Ablaze listeners, and welcome to episode 27. Well, the election debate just happened. The CNN hosted election debate for the 2024 presidential election. At least the first debate that we're going to have has just passed. I have been putting out an episode this week. Usually I try to get them out, at least by Wednesdays. But with the debate coming up, I thought I'd hold out until after the debate was over to release this. And this will be my first response to the debate. I'm going to concentrate on a few topics or questions that were asked in the debate. And what I'm going to do is, we're going to do a little bit of fact checking here. Fact checking based on actual facts, not just headlines or emotions, but actual facts. And we're going to do a more in-depth breakdown later with myself and a couple of other guests of the show. And we'll dive deeper into the debate later and actually do a breakdown. But this is going to be my initial reaction response. But first, let me raise my frosty beverage to everybody. And here's a big World Ablaze cheers to all of you that are listening around the world here. And if you got them, take your cigars, smoke them, sit back, and really take everything in. And I hope you really get something out of this. And first up is the first question I believe they asked of the night, if I'm correct. But either way, we're going to go to one of the three hot topics. And actually, the three biggest topics of the election have been border security, the economy, and abortion has been a very hot topic again. So starting with border security, I'm going to go ahead and just play these clips, and I may stop them, I may not, I may interject into them. But either way, I am going to go ahead and give you facts based on the questions and answers, and maybe even a little bit of my own opinion. All right, so let's start here. Again, from the CNN hosted 2024 presidential debate, and this is the question that was asked in regards to the border security.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the issue of immigration and border security. President Biden, a record number of migrants have illegally crossed the southern border on your watch. Overwhelming border states and overburdening cities such as New York and Chicago, and in some cases causing real safety and security concerns. Given that, why should voters trust you to solve this crisis?
Because we worked very hard to get a bipartisan agreement that not only changed all of that, it made sure that we are in a situation where you had no circumstance where they could come across the border with the number of border police there are now. We significantly increased the number of asylum officers. By the way, the Border Patrol endorsed my position. In addition to that, we found ourselves in a situation where when he was president, he was separating babies from their mothers, putting them in cages, making sure the families were separated. That's not the right way to go. What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office.
All right, I'm going to interject actually right there. So Biden had just stated that Trump separated families and threw them in cages. There may be some fact to that because it was under his administration, but it was also policies that were already put in place under the Obama administration. In fact, I remember that those cages that he's talking about were built under the Obama administration in response to detaining illegal immigrants and holding them until they could figure out whether they would be deported or accepted into the United States under the rules of asylum. Okay, so first off, he's a little off right there. Let's keep going.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look, we had the safest border in the history of our country. The border, all he had to do was leave it. All he had to do was leave it. He decided to open up our border, open up our country to people that are from prisons, people that are from mental institutions, insane asylum, terrorists. We have the largest number of terrorists coming into our country right now, all terrorists, all over the world, not just in South America, all over the world. They come from the Middle East, everywhere. All over the world, they're pouring in. And this guy just left it open. And he didn't need legislation because I didn't have legislation. I said, close the border. We had the safest border in history. In that final couple of months of my presidency, we had, according to Border Patrol, who is great, and by the way, who endorsed me for president, but I won't say that, but they endorsed me for president. Brandon, just speak to him. But look, we had the safest border in history.
I'm going to stop it. I don't know if anyone caught that, but he just called Joe Biden Brandon, which is definitely a shot. So if you don't recall what that means or what that's about, it is the chant that was covered up long ago. And the chant was "Let's Go Brandon." Well, "Let's Go Brandon" actually was a cover up because it was done during a live coverage where they were talking to President Biden at a large event, and what the crowd was actually saying was "Fuck Joe Biden." Well, the reporter at the time, hearing this and knowing that it was being caught on the live broadcast, they try to manipulate it to where they're saying, no, it doesn't. I think it sounds like they're saying, "Let's go Brandon." So President Trump definitely throws a shot at Joe Biden by calling him Brandon, which is freaking hilarious.
Now we have the worst border in history. There's never been anything like it. And people are dying all over the place, including the people that are coming up in
Thank you,
caravans.
President Trump. President Biden?
The only terrorist who's done anything crossing the border is one who came along and killed three, under his administration, killed an Al-Qaeda person come in his administration, killed three American soldiers. That's the only terrorist that's there. I'm not saying that no terrorist ever got through, but the idea they're emptying their prisons, we're welcoming these people, that's simply not true. There's no data to support what he said. Once again, he's exaggerating, he's lying.
Okay, so that's that. Let me circle back to a little bit in the beginning of this questioning in Biden's response when he made a statement that the Border Patrol actually endorses him for president and supports him. Well, that's a blatant lie. In fact, not long after the statement on X, the Border Patrol themselves, in fact, I think it was the Border Patrol Union, made a statement that they not now nor ever or ever will support nor endorse Joe Biden. So that was a blatant lie. And the Border Patrol Union themselves said, nope, we will not support Biden. The second thing I want to bring up that I wanted this to play out a little bit before I stopped it. Actually, I think we're at the end of this question. Was the border security issues. Well, Trump was right in his statement. In fact, well, he is right. He's correct. The border was safer under Trump. Okay, now Biden's trying to say that, well, hey, we got the first bipartisan agreement to close the border. We're working on doing X, Y, Z. Sure, bullshit though, because when Trump was president, under social pressures driven by the leftist media as well as by Democrats in leadership positions, they did everything they could to not support Trump's effort in closing the border by labeling him a racist. Okay? There's nothing racist about controlling our borders. Now, as far as the terrorist comment, Joe Biden did have to say, I never said there weren't terrorists coming over. But he also tries to downplay the situation we're having with terrorists that have been encountered at the border. So here's a little fact check here. In fact, this is part of my response that I made to Mark Cuban when he made a post about what was going on with the debate and calling Trump a liar. And I just want to make it clear, I might lean more Trump on this, but I'm not necessarily saying Trump is the clear winner in any way. in this debate. I mean, that's all up for debate in and of itself, and of course will be your own opinion. But here's the truth about the terrorist encounter situation. Okay, so my response was this, and I also got a lot of information that you can listen to, and you can also click the links in the show notes for episode 14, in which I did an episode about Ilhan Omar's nefarious past and her intentions, as well as taking on the crisis we have at the border. So my response in this X post was, those who say that Trump lied over 30 times in the debate don't actually know the truth and are just regurgitating what's said by the media. When he said the border was out of control and that terrorists were entering the United States, he was correct. According to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, thus far, in 2024, they have recorded encounters with 316 terrorists that are on the watch list, and the year isn't over. In 2023, they recorded encounters with 736 terrorists on the watch list. These numbers only account for those individuals who have been apprehended while entering all ports of entry. There has been a measurable increase in terrorist encounters in the United States, with a total of 1,703 encounters under Joe Biden's presidency so far. The only year that saw a dismal amount of encounters was in 2021, which was Biden's first year in office. But that was also one of the first full years of the COVID pandemic. So there you have it. And that statement I made, you can actually find the data on the Customs and Border Patrol website. It is right there. And in terms of, if we want to debate whether Trump was right about the border being more secure under his presidency versus Biden's, I got more facts for you. This is taken directly from the Customs and Border Patrol.gov website. Now, this data is going to allow me to compare what happened under Trump's presidency and Biden's presidency. And these encounters are classified differently here. Okay. So there's encounters that are basically people who were inadmissible, which refers to individuals encountered at ports of entry who are seeking lawful admission into the United States but are determined to be inadmissible. Individuals presenting themselves to seek humanitarian protection under our laws, and individuals who withdraw an application for admission and return to their countries of origin within a short time frame. Now, there's another set of data here within this table that refers to apprehensions that led to physical control or temporary detainment of a person who is not lawfully in the U.S., which may or may not result in arrest. So, literal illegal immigrants or illegal aliens, however you want to coin that term or classify these people. But I'm going to concentrate first on what is considered to be the blatantly illegal entries. Okay. So in 2017, which would be Trump's first year in office here, they recorded 310,531 illegal immigrant encounters. Contrast that to Joe Biden's first year in office in 2021, there was 1,662,167 illegal immigrants or illegal encounters with illegal aliens. Huge contrast, but we're not done. Trump's second year in office. Now, things did start going up a bit for Trump. In 2018, those illegal immigrant encounters were 404,142. Biden's second year in office, when he was in office for his second year, it was 2,214,652. Not even comparable, okay? Trump's third year in office, 859,501. Now, that was a significant spike there. But compared to Joe Biden's third year in office, it kind of went down a little bit, but it was 2,063,692. Now, let's contrast that number with Trump's last year in office, which was 2020. Now, the previous year, the third year of Trump's service to America as president, he was 859,501, as I previously mentioned, but reduced that number by about half in his last term in 2020. Illegal immigrant encounters were down to 405,036. Now, here we are on Joe Biden's final year of his term in 2024. And the numbers went down for him as well, but the year isn't over. We still have a few months to go. And Joe Biden, under his tutelage, under his presidency, his final year in office for his first term, he's at 1,293,375 illegal immigrant encounters. The data is clear. The numbers are clear. Now, if we're talking about total actions with people who are denied entrance due to, their background records or whatever, if we're looking at totals, the numbers are even more astronomical. If we're combining all data for all encounters, we're still not even close. I mean, I'll take 2023, for example. Joe Biden, 2023 versus Trump's 2019. So 2019 under Trump, total encounters for everything that was recorded with illegal versus those seeking asylum but denied or whatever the case was 1,148,024. Under Biden in 23, his third year, just as against Trump's third year, Biden was at 3,201,144. And every year there's a huge contrast, okay? A huge contrast. But again, seems like the third year spike for both presidents were pretty large for whatever reason. But let's go ahead and take Trump's first year totals. I mean, total. So his first year, 2017, was 526,901. Okay. Biden's first year in office, totals, 1,956,519. We're not even comparing. So when Trump said that they had under his presidency the most secure border like you never seen. Look, I can't say I agree with the fact or what his statement is about it being the most secure border ever in history, but it was definitely a secure border, at least a way more secure border than what we're dealing with now. Okay, but I'm not sure that the Democratic Party, at least Biden's team, actually wants to accept this data. They're definitely trying to spin it in his direction and try to blame the Republican Party for not letting him close the border. But he's dealing with the same situation that Trump did. Neither party neither opposing party, when either president is or was in office, would approve support. Trump was in office. He never got the support from the Democratic Party to be able to close the borders, but somehow Trump still made it work. Okay. Biden in office, of course, the Republican Party is going to oppose him just because that's the nature, but they did it for different reasons, because they tried to pack other things into these bills, such as more support for Ukraine, alongside the border control bill here, which made no sense. And so the Republican Party literally wanted, hey, let's separate these single item bills. And if we're going to pass anything in regard to securing our border, let's just concentrate on that. Stop trying to fold in another $60 billion for Ukraine or whatever it was. A lot of people forget about that. And the issue we're going to have with anyone or most people here trying to decide, who's going to be the president, who is the one who's right for the country, who's a liar, who isn't a liar, is you got to read past the fucking headlines, man. You really do. Again, read past the headlines because the data's there. You can't cover up facts. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic at hand that I believe most Americans are very, very, very concerned with. Of course, it's our economy. Look, our money's going to shit. It's not worth much of anything anymore. Inflation is ridiculous. The cost of living is just going astronomically out the window. People can't keep up anymore. Look, the dollar just isn't doing it for us anymore, right? It's just not happening. Everyone is starting to feel it. Even those who have what is considered to be upper middle class income, they're just not in a position to absorb it anymore either. I'm going to go ahead and play the back and forth on this question in regard to the economy.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination, what I was left with in corporate greed, is the reason why we're in this problem right now.
I'm going to address what he said about what he was left with. Okay. Especially when he was talking about jobs. So the job market, let's just be honest. Let's be real. Let's think outside of our, like I said, emotions or our support for whatever team you support here or party you support. Put your pom-poms down, stop shaking them, and let's go ahead and read some more facts. Now, you can find this information on actual statistical government websites, but I figure if anybody knows anything about money and business, it's Forbes. And Forbes actually did a breakdown and comparison in regards to economy and business under Joe Biden versus Trump. I'm just going to read the job market just because that was where I stopped. So the job market. According to Forbes, and I agree with, and these are factual numbers, both Biden and Trump oversaw strong labor markets, which they did. Since Biden took office, overall employment is up 11%. Average pay is up 17%. Okay, so that's respectable. It's good. And unemployment is down from 6.7% to 4%. Still not bad. It shows a reduction, but 4% is still not acceptable. But we did see a reduction over time under his presidency. There's more in here where I'll talk about the inflation numbers. Okay. Now, it goes on to say, perhaps Trump's most impressive labor market feat were unemployment declining from 4.7% to as low as 3.5% in 2019. Okay. And early 2020. So what happened after 2020? We get, further into 2020 and into 21. Guess what? Pandemic. After the beginning of 2020, those numbers carried over. Once the pandemic really hit our shores, everything got shut down, jobs were shut down, jobs were lost. Now, to put that decline in jobs on Trump for trying to handle an unprecedented event that no one in our lifetime has ever had to go against. I'm talking about a world pandemic. It's ridiculous. It's very ridiculous that Joe Biden is going to take credit for his job growths, the job growths against the declining jobs during the state of a pandemic under Trump, where it was instructed by medical professionals that were advising the White House to shut things down, to try to, slow the spread, as they said. Now, I will say that, Forbes does go on to say that, these numbers that Trump had under his, the unemployment numbers, which were as low as 3.5, was actually tied with the lowest level since 1969. And the wages growing by an inflation-beating 15% over his 4-year term. So yes, economically, it was way better under Trump. What happened to Trump? COVID-19. That fucked everything up for everyone. And to blame a president when every world leader had an issue with this, and just about every single country had a problem trying to navigate those waters and get their economies back, is extremely cheap and a easy, low-hanging fruit to pick from that tree of flinging insults by Joe Biden. It's bullshit. And for Joe Biden to claim that his job was so great, listen, they were bounce back jobs, like literally. There were people who finally went back to fucking work. You can't claim that, Joe. I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to go ahead and continue this.
In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. In a situation and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
Thank you. President Trump?
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID, and when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce-back jobs, a bounce-back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
So, again, as I said, and I agree with Trump, those jobs were bounce-back jobs that Biden is trying to claim and trying to add to his job growth percentages, which is bullshit. I am going to call Trump out a little bit on this, though. We did have a great economy, just as I agree, most people agree. Forbes breaks it down, and if you look at statistical government data, it'll show the same thing. But the navigation through the pandemic, Trump's just got to admit the fact. Nobody knew what they were doing. They were doing the best they could. And yes, Trump did get us through, but it wasn't squeaky clean and it wasn't amazing. I credit him for doing what he could, but it wasn't perfect. So Trump, I would have to say Trump has to admit, look, those were very tough times. We did the best we could. But the fact is, before that point, up to the point of that world catastrophe, Trump did an amazing job and the economy was doing very well. Lowest unemployment rate, tied with the best lowest unemployment rate from 1969. I mean, that's amazing. And job pay rate outpacing inflation at 15%, also amazing. So as far as inflation goes, and they're going to start getting into it here, let me play a little more and I'll go back to the inflationary numbers because that's a big thing that has come up under Biden.
Thank you. President Biden?
Well, look, the greatest economy in the world, he's the only one who thinks that, I think. I don't know anybody else who thinks he had the greatest economy in the world. And, you know, the fact of the matter is that we found ourselves in a situation where his economy, he rewarded the wealthy. He had the largest tax cut in American history, $2 trillion. He raised a deficit larger than any president has in any one term. He's the only president other than Herbert Hoover who's lost more jobs than he had when he began, since Herbert Hoover.
Again, those job losses were attributed to the COVID pandemic there, Biden. I mean, seriously? It was attributed to the COVID pandemic. This guy's a piece of work.
Did something that was significant. And the military, You know, when he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still finding ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have any, this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
President Trump, I want to follow up if I can.
Am I allowed to respond to him?
Well, I'm going to ask you a follow-up. You can do whatever you want with the minute that we give you. I want to follow up. You want to impose a 10% tariff on all goods coming into the U.S. How will you ensure that that doesn't drive prices even higher?
It's not going to drive them higher. It's just going to cost countries that have been ripping us off for years, like China and many others, in all fairness to China. It's going to just force them to pay us a lot of money, reduce our deficit tremendously, and give us a lot of power for other things. But he made a statement. The only thing he was right about is I gave you the largest tax cut in history. I also gave you the largest regulation cut in history. That's why we had all the jobs. And the jobs went down, and then they bounced back, and he's taking credit for bounce back jobs. You can't do that. He also said he inherited 9% inflation. Now, he inherited almost no inflation, and it stayed that way for 14 months. And then it blew up under his leadership because they spent money like a bunch of people that didn't know what they were doing. And they don't know what they were doing. It was the worst, probably the worst administration in history. There's never been. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, I was getting out of Afghanistan, but we were getting out with dignity, with strength, with power. He got out. It was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country's life.
I agree. Afghanistan was a mess. Everybody remembers that. It was horrible. Biden fucked that up. But before I go down that rabbit hole, in fact, I'm not even going to go too much deeper into that because it was very public, and I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you have to look at that situation, how it is handled, and you have to agree that that was a mess. But let's get back to the inflationary numbers. So, again, going back to this Forbes breakdown, inflation, which has been far worse during the Biden administration, so regardless of what Biden just said, you know, the data shows that it has been worse. Under the Biden administration, it's been up 19.9% over the first 41 months of Biden's term, compared to only 5.4% during Trump's first 41 months. I'm sorry, Biden. What did Trump leave you with? He left you with which inflationary numbers? Like, get the fuck out of here. Okay. Year over year, inflation peaked under Biden at a 4-decade high of 9% in 2022 before falling to just over 3%, which Biden has blamed on COVID-19's lingering impact and the Russia-Ukraine war. He will not take responsibility for the fact that he's driving our economy into the ground in devaluing our dollar. As far as debt, blaming Trump for all the debt he created, yes, when he was in office, the debt was large, but are you trying to tell me that sending $60 billion every chance you get to Ukraine isn't adding to our debt? That sending X amount of dollars to Israel to support their efforts, which I don't believe we should be doing because Israel is a strong, wealthy country that stands on its own. But regardless, they're our allies, but we send them support. We send money all over the world, consistently just draining our coffers, emptying our pockets to prop up and support other nations, while we just turn a blind eye to everything else that they do. Biden's a liar. And the other thing I'm going to say about Biden being a liar is he stated that no military troops anywhere in the world died under his presidency, and that is also false. Afghanistan, that's only one of the things that stand out, situations that stand out, where we did have deaths of U.S. troops. Publicized. I'm sorry, Biden, but you're just a blatant liar. And it's funny that nobody calls him out for this. All they do is say Trump lies out of his, just lies through his teeth. They stated that during this debate, he made over 30 lies. Some other person said it was over 400 lies. Like, they don't even know what they're talking about. They're just throwing things out the wall to see what sticks. The whole thing about this Trump versus Biden debate and presidential campaign is basically headlines. The more they say something, the more you will believe it, regardless of whether or not you look into the facts. Let me go ahead and continue this.
Trump, over the last 8 years, under both of your administrations, the national debt soared to record highs. And according to a new nonpartisan analysis, President Trump, your administration approved $8.4 trillion in new debt, while so far, President Biden, you've approved $4.3 trillion in new debt. So, former President Trump, many of the tax cuts that you signed into law are set to expire next year. You want to extend them and go even further, you say. With the U.S. facing trillion-dollar deficits and record debt, why should top earners and corporations pay even less in taxes than they do now?
Because the tax cuts spurred the greatest economy that we've ever seen just prior to COVID. And even after COVID, it was so strong that we were able to get through COVID much better than just about any other country. But we spurred, that tax spurred. Now, when we cut the taxes, as an example, the corporate tax was cut down to 21% from 39%, plus beyond that. We took in more revenue with much less tax, and companies were bringing back trillions of dollars back into our country. The country was going like never before, and we were ready to start paying down debt. We were ready to start using the liquid gold right under our feet, the oil and gas right under our feet. We were going to have something that nobody else has had. We got hit with COVID. We did a lot to fix it. I gave him an unbelievable situation with all of the therapeutics and all of the things that we came up with. We gave him something great. Remember, more people died under his administration, even though we had largely fixed it. More people died under his administration than our administration, and we were right in the middle of it, something which a lot of people don't like to talk about. But he had far more people dying in his administration. He did the mandate, which is a disaster, mandating it. The vaccine went out. He did a mandate on the vaccine, which is the thing that people most objected to about the vaccine. And he did a very poor job, just a very poor job. And I will tell you, not only poor there, but throughout the entire world, we're no longer respected as a country. They don't respect our leadership. They don't respect the United States anymore. We're like a third world nation between weaponization of his election, trying to go after his political opponent, all of the things he's done. We've become like a third world nation, and it's a shame. The damage he's done to our country. And I'd love to ask him, and will, why he allowed millions of people to come in here from prisons, jails, and mental institutions to come into our country and destroy our country.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 trillionaires in America. Billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 million, billion dollars, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our health care system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President.
All right, well, towards the end there, Biden is clearly showing that he's having a little bit of cognitive issues. Now, not saying he's stupid, because I got to say that when I watched the entire debate, Biden is fairly sharp. Okay, some of his responses when he's on is good. He's not stupid whatsoever. You can see he's got, when he reaches back in there into that brain, that big old brain of his, that he pulls out some fairly good responses. But getting back to the question at hand, and I'm going to also say that in this question, Trump went a bit off topic instead of just, sticking to answering the question about the economy. And everybody does this in debate. They do what they can to sling this and that at the other person to try to make them look bad or insult them. And I wish that we would eventually get to the point where we can just have a debate where both sides just really answer the question and debate the actual question being asked. But that's not how things go, unfortunately. But here we are. Now, true, is Biden wrong in Trump having one of the largest deficits? No, not necessarily. Not at all. But we aren't done adding everything up under Biden's presidency. And all the policies that have been passed, everything that's been going on with, as I said before, the continual funding of foreign nations and foreign policies, is that not being counted into the bottom line for our debt, even under Biden's presidency right now? I'm asking the question because I really don't know. But given the things that we got to say, like we already talked about inflation, we talked about job market. The other thing that was brought up was the stock market. Basically, Forbes said here that stocks performed better under Trump, period. But both presidencies did fairly well. Okay. The S&P 500 index has posted an annualized gain of 10.8% since Biden took office in 21, but compared to 14.1% under Trump. Now, the 10.8 is still respectable. It's not bad. Okay. Is Biden lying and saying that, the economy is doing okay in terms of the stock market? Because he said that before. Okay, so the stock market's doing all right. But why is everything else shit? And it still doesn't even compare to what Trump's numbers were as the stock market is concerned, with Trump's rate of 14.1%. Okay. The other thing that they didn't address that we have to go ahead and address would be gas prices, which is huge for most people, especially those who live in congested cities or commute to work. I mean, I know in California it's a big thing. I don't live in other states, obviously. I visited some. I'm sure that you have bad traffic, the whole deal. I hear New York's horrible. I'm sure parts of Chicago, etc. But I do know what we deal with, and I can definitely relate to these numbers. It says here the gas prices, average cost of gallon of gasoline dipped from $2.37 to $2.28 from December 2016 to 2020. So the gas prices were already fairly low and then went down a little bit lower through Trump's presidency. By the last week of 2020, it went to $3.58 on the last week, according to the Energy Information Administration. But gas prices rose to an all-time high of over $5 per gallon in 2022, that being the second year of Biden's presidency, shortly after Russia's invasion of Ukraine caused energy prices globally to spike as the U.S. and its allies vowed not to buy oil from Russia. Now, I'm going to fact check Forbes a little bit on this one, because gas prices weren't just directly related to what happened with the Ukraine invasion. Okay. Remember that Trump also did make us pretty much energy dependent. And Joe Biden went ahead and signed orders to basically stop the drilling and stop using our own reserves. In fact, he was selling off our reserves for a while to other nations, but we're not using it. So he's leaving us in a position where we are now becoming energy reliant, all to be able to basically convert everything over to their new Green Deal. That's a whole discussion for another episode. But I have to fact check that little piece of information here from Forbes. Now let's talk about the federal debt. The federal debt here, the national debt of $34.75 trillion is 25% higher than the day Biden took office, after rising 39% during Trump's presidency, up from $19.95 trillion in January 2017, with the U.S. running a total deficit of $5.85 trillion from its 2021 to 23 fiscal years, compared to $2.43 trillion from 2017 to 2019, and a record $3.13 trillion in 2020 alone. So if I'm reading this and I got this correct, looks like they're saying that it's actually higher under Biden's presidency. So yeah, it says here the federal government's national debt of $34.75 trillion, which is currently right now, it's 25% higher than when Biden actually took office, which is after Trump was no longer president. Interesting. So again, I guess we just caught Biden in another lie. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to the hot topic of hot topics over here. Actually, I got one more thing. I'm gonna keep beating the drum over here when it comes to the economy. And this is gonna be how money has been spent in different states under the pretty much democratically led states. There's been this going on here. Okay, the illegal immigrants as aliens, whatever. There's always been a question into how much money has been funneled into these programs to take care of illegal immigrants. Now, this didn't come up necessarily, but here's an article from 2023, and this is from the Heritage Foundation. It says deluxe housing for illegal migrants, but not for the military. So basically, here's a few key takeaways here. First key takeaway, the Biden administration is paying $2.5 billion, $2.5 billion in taxpayer funds for immigration and customs enforcement to house illegal immigrants or illegal migrants. The contrast between these generous living conditions and the housing situation for American military families is stark. Also, these numbers don't lie. They provide a stark demonstration of who they care and don't care about if Biden won't fix the discrepancy Congress should. So it says the Biden administration is paying $2.5 billion in taxpayer funds for immigration and customs enforcement to house illegal migrants. ICE provides them not only food and bed, but medical and dental care, recreation, and other services to meet higher standards than county detention systems, for example. However, the administration is not filling the beds in these facilities. It's choosing to bypass ICE and simply release the migrants onto the streets in many cases where they need to be housed in other facilities. So they're wasting money paying for these facilities for them to be housed, then putting them on the street anyway, where they have to go and be paid to be housed elsewhere anyway. Okay, so that's one thing that a lot of people don't bring up and didn't realize. And you got to dig for a lot of this information here, okay? You really do. There's another couple schemes that were going on. Daily Mail was given exclusive access to 2 California hotels temporary housing migrants under a $500,000 a month government-funded scheme. So $500,000 a month to house illegal migrants, spent and supported by the government. And basically what they were doing is they were buying out these hotels in where they were going to use the entire hotel to house illegal migrants. This was funded by the state of California and by FEMA, okay? Federal government organization, FEMA. More money being spent by Biden, and I understand the sentiment, especially for those seeking legal asylum. I get wanting to make sure another human being has a right to food, shelter, clothing, and access to, medical care. But taking taxpayers' money and just frivolously spending it like it's not yours because it isn't, it is the taxpayers' money, is uncalled for and ridiculous. So yes, under Biden, the economy has been shit. All right, now let's talk abortion. Okay, this is a hot topic. You're never going to get it wrong on this because this really comes down to being a moral issue, it seems like, than it does anything else. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just play this exchange right now.
Staying on the topic of abortion, President Biden, 7 states, I'll let you do that. This is the same topic. 7 states have no legal restrictions on how far into a pregnancy a woman can obtain an abortion. Do you support any legal limits on how late a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. The first time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state. The idea that the politicians, that the founders wanted the politicians to be the ones making decisions about women's health is ridiculous. That's the last. No politician should be making that decision. A doctor should be making those decisions. That's how it should be run. That's what you're going to do. And if I'm elected, I'm going to restore Roe v. Wade.
So that means he can take the life of the baby in the 9th month and even after birth, because some states, Democrat run, take it after birth. Again, the former governor of Virginia, put the baby down, then we decide what to do with it. So he's willing to, as we say, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month and kill the baby. Nobody wants that to happen, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants it to happen.
Okay, what Trump is referring to is Virginia Democratic Governor Ralph Northam back in 2019, where he made a statement regarding late-term abortions. Here's a quote taken from a radio interview that he did, stating, "Third trimester abortions are done in cases where there may be severe deformities. There may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen." Northam, a pediatric neurosurgeon, told Washington radio station WTOP the infant would be delivered, the infant would be kept comfortable, the infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So that was what he said. And I'm not sure if it's a direct support of late-term abortion, but it does leave it open to discussion where it comes down to, well, you know, there's a birth here, and if it's a non-viable birth, as in maybe they were stillborn and then resuscitated, but that's only if that's what the mother and father want. That's one decision to make there. Are we going to resuscitate this child, this newborn, if the newborn is severely deformed? I mean, there's a lot of things that are left out in the open. And then there were other things said saying that they have to take into account the health and welfare of the mother, which is also including mental health. So that is what President Trump was referring to. Now, is it a direct correlation or direct statement that supports late-term abortions? I'm not so sure. But there are states that do have absolutely no term limits. And in the beginning, when the question was asked, it was stated that there were 7 states, but it's actually 6 states as well as Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. And those states that do not have restrictions, okay, which means they don't have necessarily a term limit. Let me read these off here. So there's Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, Vermont, Minnesota, Alaska, and of course we have Washington, D.C. that all have no limits on abortion terms.
That is simply not true. The Roe v. Wade does not provide for that. That's not the circumstance. Only if a woman's life is in danger, she's going to die. That's the only circumstance in which that can happen. But we are not for late-term abortion, period. Period.
Under Roe v. Wade, you have late-term abortion. You can do whatever you want, depending on the state. You can do whatever you want. We don't think that's a good thing. We think it's a radical thing. We think the Democrats are the radicals, not the Republicans.
Again, good response, because as I just stated earlier, and in the beginning of the question, as it was stated, there are actually 6 states as well as the District of Columbia that have no limits on when an abortion can be done. Again, I'm not saying Biden's right or wrong in the context of this question and how he's answering it, but I do have to point that out.
51 years, that was the law. 51 years, constitutional scholarship said it was the right way to go. 51 years, and it was taken away because this guy put very conservative members on the Supreme Court. He takes credit for taking it away. What's he going to do? What's he going to do, in fact, if the MAGA Republicans, he gets elected, and the MAGA Republicans control the Congress, and they pass a universal ban on abortion, period, across the board at 6 weeks or 7 or 8 or 10 weeks, something very, very conservative. Is he going to sign that bill? I'll veto it. He'll sign it.
Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. I'm going to read a little bit more about what was going on with the term limit situation that wasn't really directly answered by Biden in and of itself. He just said, I support Roe v. Wade. And then he also pointed out that, well, if, MAGA Republicans get into office and they're in charge, that they may have some crazy restriction as you can't have an abortion past 10 weeks or whatever. Well, of course they're going to have a restriction. there should be restrictions on it. There should be exceptions as well, but there should be restrictions on how late an abortion should be able to be administered, period. There was a case similar to Roe v. Wade, very related, which was Doe versus Bolton. And of course, let me tie this back to what he said about he just supports Roe v. Wade. I'm referring to Biden. It says here that the legislation supported by Biden following the leak of the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization decision in May 2022 would have liberalized abortion beyond Roe. The bill would have created a statutory right to the procedure up until the point of viability, and beyond that point if the doctor using, listen to this, good faith medical judgment determined that the procedure is necessary for the preservation of the life or health of the person who is pregnant. Okay. The bill's chief sponsor, Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, said of the bill that there was a blurry line between the physical and mental health of a mother in the context of abortion. Supreme Court precedent also has liberal interpretation of what constitutes a health exception from the case of Doe v. Bolton, which says health can include physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age. So there you have it. There are exceptions written in to Roe v. Wade based on the case of Doe v. versus Bolton that takes into account that, well, if it comes down to the woman's health, which will include emotional, psychological, familial, I'm not really sure how that comes into play, and the woman's age, that there in fact could be a late-term abortion decision, basically an abortion decision after birth. And so there you have it. I'm not really sure where Joe stands. I know where Trump stands, but I have no idea where Joe stands, as he wasn't being very clear about what he supported in that circumstance or that situation when it comes to late-term abortions. I do know that there are multiple states that are democratically run that have no limits on when it is okay to administer abortion or not, including Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia. And so with that being said, I'm going to start closing this out because I just wanted to concentrate on those 3 points. I honestly could have dove way deeper and pulled out way more facts and articles, but this was my first initial response. This is just as my first reaction, response to what was going on here in this debate. And I got to tell you, if anything, look, I don't think it was brilliant for either side. I got to say that this may be one of the best times I've seen a performance in terms of a debate from Biden in a while. In fact, he hardly ever debates anyway. So he didn't do as bad as I thought, but he wasn't perfect whatsoever. And it looks at times like he is literally a robot with a glitch. Like there's times where he seems so amped up and ready to go, and then all of a sudden everything glitches and he just shuts down and sits there with a gaping open mouth looking into nothingness. And that's not a good look for the country. And that is just not a good position for the leader of the United States to be in. Look, Biden, it's time to hang it up. But listen, the people need to decide here, and I hope that they vote wisely. But again, as far as this debate goes, I'm not sure either side necessarily came out ahead. We need more debates between these two to really see, how things are going to go and give us more information so that we can make an informed decision for the country. I'll tell you right now, I'm not leaning towards Biden whatsoever, but I do wish Trump himself would have went ahead and answered some of these questions differently with a little more depth and a little more facts behind it outside of just, basically throwing a blanket statement out there, which were true. And I pulled up facts to support. But at the same time, I think it would have been a better look for him if he was able to give more depth to his answers and bring up more facts to support his answers. And I do think he needs to also have a little bit of humility, because Trump was not perfect in his presidency whatsoever. I mean, yes, his mouth did get the better of him at times, but between Joe and between Trump, it's pretty obvious that we were in much better shape when Trump was president. And the last thing we need is an extension of this horrible, horrible state that we're in under Joe Biden. All right, that's all I got. Please like, please share, please subscribe, and continue to listen to the show. We appreciate everybody. I hope you all make the right decision and listen for our debate breakdown coming out soon.
Hold your breath and feel the tension. Devils hide behind redemption. Honesty is a one-way gate to hell.
Polestar 2. Get behind the wheel and experience the electric performance of Polestar cars. Starting from $42,995. Test drives available in Sandyford and now Malahide for a limited time. Book your test drive today at polestar.com.